After 2 years of Elden Ring, there are still mysteries that remain unsolved. One of those mysteries is a simple question: who impaled Marika? Was it the Elden Beast, Maliketh, or Messmer's impaler as suggested by many after the trailer? Or perhaps the answer is more simple than that. Perhaps you impaled Marika, us, the Tarnished. But how? And most importantly, when did we do it? In order to answer this, we need at first to split the facts from fiction. We need to know who imprisoned Marika, as well as understand what the Elden Ring and Marika truly are.
Queen Marika is the vessel of the Elden Ring, carrier of its vision. A god in truth. But after the Elden Ring's shattering, she was imprisoned in the Erd Tree. A grim punishment for shattering the Order, despite her godhood. The fingers speak. Marika's trespass demanded a heavy sentence. But even in shackles, she remains a god and the vision's vessel.
The greater will punishment for Marika was imprisonment in the Earth Tree, yet she remained a god and the vessel of the Elden Ring. From that dialogue, many people theorized that the spear wasn't the doing of the greater will, and indeed we can see this special attack by the Elden Beast. He crucifies the player in the same manner Marika is crucified, yet those little spears are golden, unlike the one impaling Marika. But what is impaling Marika? The color of the spear is almost identical to Distant Death. Here we can see that the Rune of Death design is actually very close to the spear. But what is Distant Death and who controls it? Distant Death is the concept of death in the lands between that was removed by Marika by removing the Rune of Death from the Elden Ring. The Elden Ring is a reality-altering tool sent by the Greater Will in the form of the Elden Beast. We can read here. It is said that long ago, the Greater Will sent a golden star bearing a beast into the lands between, which would later become the Elden Ring. You can think of the Elden Ring as the Infinity Gauntlet from Marvel Comics. It consists of runes instead of Infinity Stones. Those runes govern the aspects of existence in the lands between. Basically, the Elden Ring is the lands between, but the Elden Ring needs a vessel. The being that becomes the Elden Ring is the god of the age. It's up to this vessel to decide the rules of the lands between. The simple act of removing a certain rune from the Elden Ring would remove that concept from the lands between. As we already know, Queen Marika was the vessel of the Elden Ring. They were one and the same. And such, when she became the vessel, she decided to remove the Rune of Death from the Elden Ring, removing the entire concept of death from the lands between. At this moment, the Golden Order was established, an order without death. The Rune of Death was left in the protection of Maliketh, the Black Blade. On a sad night, Ranni stole a fragment from the Rune of Death and used it to kill Godwin. After that, Maliketh sealed it entirely so it wouldn't happen again. In this light, let's look at the most popular theories on the subject before saying a new theory.
Oh, death. Become my blade once more.
Being the only one with access to Distant Death, Maliketh was suggested as a candidate. But there are two problems. First, Maliketh is the shadow of Queen Marika. He's her protector, and if she betrayed the Greater Will, he will kill her. Someone can jump to the conclusion that he did that because Marika betrayed the Greater Will. But we already established through in-game lore that the Greater Will didn't want Marika dead. Her actions wasn't viewed as betrayal but as a transgression, and she was punished for it. So Maliketh wouldn't be allowed to do so. Another important thing is that Radagon sealed the entrance to the Earthtree, therefore Maliketh couldn't enter. As such, Maliketh is probably not the Impaler. A very popular theory suggests that Melina is a Gloamite queen due to the Frenzied Flame ending, and she used Destined Death on Marika as she is her old nemesis. Yes, Melina seemed to have a connection to Destined Death, but that is because she is a Kindling Maiden. The one who walks alongside Flame shall one day meet the road of Destined Death. In order to truly burn the Earthtree, you need to unleash Destined Death back to the lands between. Melina is now a spirit, and she probably had access to the Earthtree judging by her backstory. Her purpose was given to her by her mother inside the Earthtree, but the problem is Melina never had access to Destined Death. As we already know from in-game lore, Maliketh sealed death entirely after Ranni stole the fragment. No way Melina had access to it, and we don't even know if she was always a Gloamite queen or just became her in the Frenzied Flame. I had a video explaining my view on Melina. In that video I said that she probably a part of Marika herself. You can check it after this one. But even if we assume that she is the Gloamite queen and wanted to take revenge, she simply didn't have access to Destined Death anymore.
Unless, of course, thou shouldst take the crown.
Ranni have various ties to the Rune of Death. Long ago, she stole a fragment of Destined Death from Maliketh and made a weapon that can kill a demigod. She used it to assassinate Godwin the Golden to get rid of her Empyrean flesh. So, could she have been the one that impaled Marika? If we assumed she could access the Earthtree as she was in a spirit form, she already used that fragment of Rune of Death on Godwin, so she doesn't have access to death anymore. Even if we assume that she has, she simply doesn't gain anything from doing that. Ranni just didn't want to be an Empyrean and she already got rid of her flesh. From what we know, she focused all of her efforts on releasing her fate to kill her two fingers. She wanted to kill Radon to open the way to Nokro. She simply doesn't have any interest in Marika.
Of gold shall all meet death in the embrace of Messmer's flame.
After Shadow of the Earthtree trailer, many people jumped to the conclusion that Messmer impaled Marika, hence the name, the Impaler. But again, this is really out of place. I mean, Messmer is banished in the Shadowlands and it's physically separate with no way for him to get back. We can only access it in the DLC because of Mikulat reporting us there, and he went there by discarding his Empyrean flesh. So the act of Messmer just casually walking out of the Shadowlands and impaling Marika is very unlikely. Also, we don't actually know if Messmer has a relation to Destined Death or not. Even if Messmer has access to Destined Death and can get out of the Shadowlands, he wouldn't have access to the Earthtree. So after all of this, we still have no answer. But then I had this idea. What if we are just overthinking it and the answer was in front of us the whole time? First, why did we assume that being impaled by Destined Death is an act of vengeance or even damage to Marika? We already know that Marika isn't killed by the spear. She actually doesn't seem very affected by it. The second assumption is that Marika was always impaled by the spear after the shattering. Who said that Marika was impaled before we enter the Earthtree? Perhaps our actions led to her being impaled by Destined Death. Remember what we established at the start of the video. Destined Death was removed from the lands between by removing the Rune of Death from the Elden Ring. And what does we do? We unleash Destined Death back to the lands between to truly burn the Earthtree and get access to Marika. So if removing the Rune of Death took away death from the lands between, the most logical conclusion is that unleashing death would return the Rune of Death to the Elden Ring. As we said, the Elden Ring decide the rules of the lands between. And what is the Elden Ring? It's basically Marika herself. So it becomes more clear now. When we unleashed death back to the lands between, the rune of death went back to the Elden Ring. Therefore, it went back to Queen Marika and joined with her, physically manifested as the red/black spear. And that explains why after defeating the Elden Beast and mending the Elden Ring, the spear isn't there. It's fully emerged with Marika/Elden Ring, and death became a part of the Elden Ring. It's even very thematic. The Golden Order was established by removing the Rune of Death, and it was destroyed by the return of the Rune of Death. So at the end, the answer of who impaled Marika is you. I know it's not as cool and mind-blowing as saying it was Messmer or the Gloamite Queen, but not everything need to be so. Some questions have a more simple answers. Hit the like and subscribe button if you enjoyed, and until next time, farewell, fellow Tarnished.